The Census Bureau recently released the official numbers on income and poverty for 2007, and I want to underscore a few key facts from that release. First, poverty did not fall to any appreciable extent throughout the economic expansion of the 2000s. If you look in past decades, when unemployment rises, poverty goes up. When it falls, poverty goes down. When unemployment fell after 2003, poverty essentially stayed flat. This sluggishness on the part of the poverty rate reflects general sluggish growth in income by all people in the bottom half of the income distribution. Both those in the middle as well as at the bottom of the distribution had lower incomes in 2007 than they did in 2000. And of course, if the 2007 data doesn't look as good as we might have hoped, 2008, I promise you, will look substantially worse. Given the rapidly rising unemployment and the recent economic news that's been dominating all of the newspapers, poverty is going to be a major issue in the agenda of the next administration. I've been asked to spend most of my time this morning focusing, however, not on these numbers, but on the measurement of poverty itself. There's widespread agreement that our poverty measure is badly flawed and needs to be updated. A bill to improve and to produce a modern poverty measure was just introduced in the House by Congressman McDermott, and Senator Dodd is working on companion legislation in the Senate. Our current poverty measure was defined in 1963 by the Social Security Administration. It contains two components, a poverty line, and a resource definition against which you compare families' resources to see if they're above or below that line. Let me talk about each in turn. The current poverty line is easy. It's 3 times a subsistence food budget. The subsistence food budget was defined by the USDA in 1961 based on 1955 household consumption survey data. The multiplier of 3 came about because the average family in 1955 spent 1/3 of their income on food. If you spend 1/3 of your income on food, take 3 times a food budget and you have a poverty line. With only minor changes, our current poverty line is this number, calculated in 63 based on 55 data and updated by the Consumer Price Index. There is no other economic statistic in use today that relies on 55 data and on such outmoded methodologies. The resource measure in the poverty line was very simply a family's cash income. While that might have made sense in the early 1960s, it is also badly outdated. It is no longer an adequate description of the sort of resources that families have available. If a disabled individual starts to receive Medicaid, this doesn't show up in their poverty count. If a family receives food stamps, it doesn't affect the poverty count. If a worker receives an EITC refund check, it doesn't affect the poverty count. Why does this matter? Our measured poverty rate is simply insensitive to most of the dollars and most of the policies that we have expanded in the last 3 decades. In a fundamental way, our poverty measure has undercounted policy gains and made it easy to claim that public spending on the poor has had little effect. Now, this doesn't mean that our official measure is completely meaningless. In a year like 2007, with no policy or tax changes, it does measure what the economic effects were on the low-income population. But we can and should do better in an official economic statistic. In the mid-1990s, the National Academy of Sciences was asked by Congress to make a recommendation for improving the measure of poverty, and they came out with a rather major volume that describes how to improve this statistic. The panel recommended calculating a poverty line based on a set of expenditures: food, shelter, clothing, utilities, plus a little bit more. They recommended a resource definition that started with cash income but took account of taxes, added in-kind benefits, and subtracted off unavoidable payments on medical expenses or on work expenses. All of these changes have been much discussed in the years since then, and in fact, a good number of states and localities have been expressing interest in this new line as well. This last summer, for instance, New York City developed a city-specific poverty measure based on the National Academy approach. It's time to break through the political logjam that has prevented the development and the utilization of an updated poverty measurement. The new legislation in front of the House and the Senate will do this, directing the Census Bureau to develop a modern poverty measure using the National Academy recommendations. Of course, improving the measure of poverty will not reduce poverty. We also need to combine that with policies, such as, and you mentioned these earlier, expanding the EITC to workers who do not have families in their household, do not have children in their household, increasing assistance to help working mothers in particular pay for childcare. In addition, we need to assure the presence of an effective safety net, helping in particular disconnected women neither working nor on welfare, to be able to stabilize their incomes. We also need to make sure that unemployment insurance serves those who are without a job. Right now, it serves less than 40% of them. Our official statistics indicate that poverty in this country rose last year. It's going to rise further and faster in the year ahead. We need the legislation that will help us measure this problem and know what its boundaries are and who is most affected by it. We also, of course, beyond good measurement, need good policy as well, supporting those who are working and giving assistance to those for whom jobs are not immediately available. Thank you.